Jose Rizal called for peaceful reform of Spain's colonial rule in the Philippines. After his 1896 execution, he became an icon for the nationalist movement. So who was Jose Rizal? While living in Europe, Jose Rizal wrote about the discrimination that accompanied Spain's colonial rule of his country. He returned to the Philippines in 1892 but was exiled due to his desire for reform. Although he supported peaceful change, Rizal was convicted of sedition and executed on December 30, 1896 at age of 35. Since Jose Rizal was also well-traveled, he met and fell in love with all sorts of women from different parts of the world. So here's a definitive list of Rizal ex-lovers ranked depending on their level of badassery.
Segunda Katigbak is from Lipa, Batangas. Segunda Katigbak is a puppy love of Rizal. Segunda, who was 14 years old when she met Jose Rizal. Every Thursday and Sunday, Rizal visited the Colegio de la Concordia, where his sister Olympia and Segunda lived. During this time, Rizal finally fell in love with Segunda. But despite this, Rizal suffered a loss of love again, because Segunda is set to marry to Manuel Luz, even though Segunda does not want it. Rizal was unable to express his love for Segunda. He seems to have lost the courage during those times, until Segunda Katigbak finally disappeared. Years later, Segunda returned to Lipa, and with her brother leaving a frustrated Rizal to the mercy of his nostalgic memories, ended at an early hour, my first love. My virgin heart will always mourn the reckless step it took on the flower-decked abyss. My illusion will return, yes, but indifferent, uncertain, ready for the first betrayal on the path of love. Rizal met Leonor or Orang Valenzuela when he was still studying at the University of Santo Tomas. This is next to Rizal where the Valenzuela people stay, and they always stay with his friends there. Orang gradually fell in love with Rizal because of Jose's talent. Rizal used to give Orang letters written in ink that could only be seen on a lamp. But for Rizal, it would be better if he only considered Orang as a friend than if he considered him his girlfriend. This decision was also triggered by Rizal's, especially prejudice against another Leonor Rivera, but the young Rizal has a special view of Orang. They may not feel the love same for each other when he accepts other lovers, so they did not stay long. There were not even tears in his eyes as Rizal left for Spain. Consuelo Ortega. In 1882, when Rizal was a student at the Universidad Central de Madrid, he frequented the home of Don Pablo Ortega y Rey, the former city mayor of Manila. He lived with his son Rafael and his daughter Consuelo. Rizal thought he was not handsome man, possessed a great deal of charisma, and was gifted with many talents and a deeply noble character. For this reason, it is of no surprise that Consuelo, the prettier of Don Pablo's daughter, was very taken with him. Being lonely and somewhat isolated in a foreign country, Rizal found comfort in Consuelo's vivacious company. He wrote her a poem entitled A la Señorita COYP to Miss COYP, in which they express his great admiration for the lady. Rizal's romance with Consuelo did not turn into a serious affair. He decided to take a step back for two reasons. First, he was still engaged to Leonor Rivera at that time. And the second, he was aware when Rizal was in Tokyo a few days after he had moved to the Azabu district in 1888. He spotted a pretty Japanese girl walking past the Legion Gate. He was captured by the lady's regal air and charisma and endeavored to find ways to meet her. The girl's name was Shiko Usui. She lived with her parents and often took afternoon walk by the legation. Rizal waited by the gate one afternoon and introduced himself. Rizal and Osei-san, as he fondly called her, met almost daily. They toured the beautiful city spots, enjoyed the scenery, and visited the picturesque shrine. Rizal was then a lonely young physician, disillusioned by his frustrated romance with Leonor Rivera and burdened by sordid hopes for justice in his country. Osei-san provided the beautiful escape that he deeply needed, and he saw in her the qualities of his ideal woman. He was her first love. Because of his deep affection of her, Rizal was almost tempted to settle down in Japan. Conveniently enough, he was also offered a good position at the Spanish legation during that time. Rizal, however, had set his sight on other matters. He decided to leave Japan and forget his romance, which pained him gravely as attested by an entry in his diary. His 45-day sojourn in Japan was one of the happiest interludes in his life. In May 1888, Rizal visited London for a short time, boarding the house of the Becket family, Mr. and Mrs. Becket, their two sons, and their four daughters. The eldest daughter was named Gertrude. Gertrude was a buxom young lady with blue eyes and brown hair. She fell in love with Rizal and gave him all of her attention during the family picnics and gatherings. When Rizal stayed indoors during rainy days, painting and sculpturing, she helped him mix his color and prepare his clay. Rizal enjoyed her company. Eventually, their flirtatious friendship drifted towards a blossoming romance. He affectionately called her Jetty, and in return she called him Petty. Rizal withdrew before his relationship with Jetty could become more serious, realizing that he had a greater mission to fulfill and that in order to accomplish it he could not yield to the option of marrying her. He suppressed the yearnings of his heart and decided to live so that the lady may forget him. Before he did, however, he finished a number of sculpture works, one of which was carving of the heads of Beckett's sisters. In 1891, Rizal took a vacation in Biarritz in order to find reprieve from his troubles in Madrid. He was a guest of the Bosted family in their winter residence, Villa Iliada. Mr. and Mrs. Bosted had two beautiful daughters, Adelina and Nelly. After having lamented his frustrated romance with Leonor Rivera on account of the lady's engagement to another man, Rizal came to develop considerable affection for Nelly. the prettier and young daughter of Mr. Eduardo boasted. He found her to be intelligent, morally upright, and full of life. Rizal wrote to his closest friend about his intention to marry her. Rizal friends were delighted to hear that he had found a suitable girl whom he at last wished to settle down with. Even Antonio Luna, who had previously loved Nelly, encouraged Rizal to court her and ask for her hand in marriage. With all the encouragement from the friends he held dear, Rizal wooed Nelly, also called Nelly, who in turn returned his affections. Rizal's marriage proposal failed for two reasons. First, Nelly demanded that he give up his Catholic faith and convert to Protestantism, which was her religion. Rizal did not like this idea. Second, Nelly's mother did not approve of Rizal as she had no desire to entrust her daughter to a man who was waiting in wealth and persecuted in his own country. In spite of the circumstances, Rizal and Nelly parted as good friends. On January 28, 1890, Rizal left for Brussels, Belgium. He stayed for a considerable time, paying for room and board. His landladies had a pretty niece named Petite Suzanne Jacobi. She was taken by Rizal's charm and gallantry and provided him good company. Rizal could have flirted with the lady, considering that his beloved Leonor was far away and he was a lonely man in a strange and foreign land. But he realized he could not deceive her. Suzanne fell in love with Rizal and wept when he left from Madrid in July 1890. She wrote to him in French, "Where are you now? Do you think of me once in a while? I am reminded of your tender conversation. Reading your letter, although it is cold and indifferent, here in your letter I have something which makes up for your absence. How pleased I would be to follow you, to travel with you, who are always in my thoughts. You wish me all kinds of luck, but forget that in the absence of a beloved one, a tender heart cannot feel happy. A thousand things serve to distract your mind, my friend, but in my case, I am sad, lonely, always alone with my thoughts. Nothing, absolutely nothing relieves my sorrow. Are you coming back? That's what I want and desire most ardently. You cannot refuse me. I do not disappear, and I limit myself to murmuring against time which runs so fast when it carries us toward separation, but goes so slowly when it's bringing us together again. I feel very unhappy at thinking that perhaps I might never see you again. Goodbye. You know, with one word you can make me very happy. Aren't you going to write to me?"
Rizal's exile in Dapitan was one of the most lonesome and sorrowful periods of his life. He missed the company of his friends and family, and the death of Leonor Rivera on August 28, 1893, left a gaping void in his heart. Josephine Bracken arrived at the shores of Dapitan accompanying her blind adopted father, Mr. George Toffer. No ophthalmologist in Hong Kong, their home country, could cure the man's blindness, and so they sought the services of the famous Dr. Rizal. Rizal and Josephine fell in love at first sight. The romantic interlude went on for about a month, after which they decided to marry. The priest of the Pitan, however, refused to conduct the ceremony without consent from the Bishop of Cebu. When Mr. Toffer heard of his daughter's plan to marry, he became so angered at the thought of losing Josephine that he attempted to kill himself with a razor to his throat. Rizal prevented this tragedy by holding the man's wrist back. Josephine left with his father on the first available steamer to Manila in order to avoid more trouble. Since Mr. Toffer's blindness was venereal in nature, it was incurable. Mr. Toffer went back to Hong Kong alone, and Josephine stayed in Manila with Rizal's family. At length, she returned to the Bitan. Since no priest would marry them, Rizal and Josephine held hands, exchanged vows, and married themselves before God. Rizal and Josephine lived together in the Pitan as husbands and wife, and in early 1896 they were expecting a baby. Unfortunately, Josephine had to go into premature labor after Rizal played her a prank and frightened her. A little boy of 8 months was born, who lived for only 3 hours. Rizal named him Francisco in honor of his father and buried the child in Dapitan.